this last video, I'm going to show you some methodologies for controlling display and analysis capability of the file by working with the attribute table. Right now, if we look at the attribute table for this trail, it's very limited. There's not much discussion, description, categorization, or anything. I was asked by the group to consider how to manipulate this file so that different portions of this trail could be symbolized or analyzed separately. The best way to do that is not to make separate shape files for different portions or even different generations or types of trails, but rather have one thematic shapefile on the single theme of trails and distinguish among different dates or uses or segments or whatever by means of an attribute in the attribute table. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll open the attribute table, and I can go ahead and add a new field. Using this button right here, I can add a new field, and I can say, I think I'll make it a text field so it can be descriptions, and I'm going to call that description 1 as a title for the field. Creating new titles in attribute tables, you need to use extremely short and simple headers for some reason, and DESCR is simple enough and short enough. And now I have a description field in which I can store some bit of information about each of these particular items. So in the editor, in order to actually enter something, and I'm trying very hard to put something into these boxes and I can't. The reason I can't is because I haven't started the editor yet. I need to have the editor turned on in order to alter the attribute table. So I'll turn on the editor for the trail, and now I can go ahead and type stuff into this attribute table. What I want to do though is figure out what I should be typing in, and I can do that, and the way I can do that is I can shrink down my attribute table and select one particular feature in the attribute table, which, since there's a one-to-one correlation between a record in the attribute table and the feature in the shapefile or in the geography, I can now see what FID0 is. It's this right here, and I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is call that loop 1, and maybe a comma, and call that woods. And this is just a first attempt at how I'm going to build the attribute table. I could build, in fact I'm going to limit it to loop 1. I could build other columns, other attributes in the attribute table to provide even more information for symbolizing, describing, etc. the various trails here. I'm going to select the next one, and I guess I might as well, following the pattern, I'm going to call that loop 2. I'm going to select here, and this is called Marsh Spur. It's giving it my own name for the moment. This one here is Connector, and this one here is Approach. So I've given whatever value or descriptions I want, and now I can go ahead and save my edits and stop editing, and now I actually have a shapefile which reflects the fact that each of these are different trail types, different trail segments with different trail purposes, and I can go ahead then and use my properties tool and symbology and categories, and I can use description 1, add all values, and have a different symbology for each of the different trail segments. And it's thin and wimpy, and I can improve the symbology, take out the all others, and symbolize it as what I want. But at least at this point I've shown you that by editing and creating the attribute table, I can distinguish among these different loops, give them different symbologies, different descriptions, different web pages in a online description of the trail network, etc. The last thing I want to show in this video is the use of um, a tool called Smooth Line in cartography. And what this tool allows me to do is, once I enter the tool, it allows me to take this shapefile and get rid of the jagged corners and rough edges on this to make it more presentable. And right now we're laying out a new data set, a new trail, so that having, and it will probably, the as-built of this trail will probably be different, but for presentation purposes, I think it's good to, I'm going to pause this while I find a location for the file to be stored at. So I've found a place to store the output file. I tracked down the folder. The PA-EK algorithm is the default, and that's a good one to use. I'm going to pick a smoothing tolerance of 5 meters, and we may redo this and change that later, but that indicates how much smoothing there is, whether it's just cutting off sharp corners or actually turning this into a much smoother thing. And I took the other defaults, and now I can just go ahead and say OK, and I should shortly see the progress bar, and then it should initiate the tool, and I'll see a progress bar, and when it's done I will return to the video. So I've run the smoothing algorithm, and I discovered that it's good to give a larger smoothing radius to get to make a nicer, smoother product out of this. So I chose a smoothing radius of 25 meters, and this is the product. It's visible here, the original kind of sharp-edged trail suggestion is now smoothed out, and all the corners have been smoothed into nice, neat trails. And they'll, of course, be editable later on. But now if I turn that off, zoom to layer, and make the trail more visible with my tool, we can see that now we have a trail network that does not have the jaggy edges, and it looks more professional and artistic. And once again, we can see that that's an individual item called loop 2. That's an individual item called loop connector. That's loop 1, etc. And that's the marsh spur, if we want to call it that. So now we have a completely redone trail, which I'll send along to the group.